You are a court servant, barely more than a shadow in the palace. It is the winter of 1774, and your boots sink into the velvet silence of the Catherine Palace. Frost webs the arched windows, but within, the air is thick with scent. Amber, sweat, overripe roses. You've been summoned in the dead of night, again, to deliver a message no quill dared record. You pause outside the Empress's inner apartments. The carved double doors gleam with gold leaf, but you know better than to admire them. Behind them, muffled laughter mingles with the low moan of someone too young, too powerless, to refuse her. A guard 2 steps behind you murmurs, "Don't look at her, not even if she speaks to you." You step forward. The doors open without a sound. Inside, Catherine the Great reclines like a goddess grown tired of gods. Draped in silks, her heavy-lidded gaze fixes on the boy beside her, one of the new cadets, no more than 16, trembling as he lifts a glass of Tokay to her lips. She doesn't drink. She smiles. And you realize, this isn't an affair. It's a ceremony. Think Catherine the Great was a visionary ruler who dragged Russia into the modern age? Think again. What you're seeing is the machinery of power turned inward, where politics is foreplay and the fate of nations is decided in bedchambers, not boardrooms. Catherine didn't just sleep with her favorites. She remade them into kings, generals, princes, and she unmade them just as swiftly. This isn't romantic indulgence. It's a system of control so elaborate, so quietly devastating, it nearly shattered the spine of the Russian Empire. And the truth? It was never a secret. Catherine's lovers weren't hidden. They were paraded, promoted, lavished with titles, palaces, and the unspoken expectation: entertain the Empress or vanish. The ones who pleased her became gods for a season. The ones who failed, their names are not remembered. But here's where it gets darker. The Empress's appetites weren't just personal, they were political. Each new favorite displaced old power, rewired court loyalties, and threw entire ministries into chaos. From Grigory Orlov to Ivan Rimsky-Korsakov, the royal bed became the axis of statecraft. One historian called it a throne draped in sheets. And those sheets changed daily. Even the guards who escorted her lovers knew it. Records show secret payments to officers who vetted the suitability of candidates: young, beautiful, obedient. When she tired of one, they were exiled to distant posts or retired into silence. But here's what they don't teach in textbooks. This wasn't just lust. It was strategy, desperation, and revenge, twisted together until no one, not even Catherine, could separate them. She had seized power through a coup, watched her husband strangled in a drunken brawl, and lived each day beneath the shadow of rebellion. Intimacy became her fortress. Control became desire. And in this fortress, the most intimate acts were state performances. The year is 1762. You are a young officer, just elevated to her personal guard. The rumors are true. Catherine has noticed you. A summons arrives at midnight. You are bathed, dressed, instructed. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not resist. Do not disappoint. The chamber you enter is dimly lit, its walls draped with French tapestries. Catherine waits. Behind her, a table already bears your military commission, signed and sealed. The ink is still wet. You are not being courted. You are being drafted. Because here, the battlefield is velvet, and every victory smells like perfume and powder. What happens next will elevate your name, or erase it. But this is only the beginning. The reality behind Russia's greatest empress is far more disturbing than legend admits. Coming up, how Catherine's private passions ignited a national uprising, plunged the empire into war, and nearly tore Russia apart from within. And the next revelation will make you question whether any empire can survive when desire rules the throne. You are a stable boy in the imperial barracks, barely 17. The air reeks of hay and animal sweat. But tonight something else drifts in. The scent of polished boots, imported oils, and candle smoke from the Empress's quarters. You were told to groom the stallion, meant for General Grigory Orlov. But he never arrived. Instead, you saw him last night, shirtless and laughing, as palace attendants led him towards the Empress's wing. This morning he wears a uniform, stitched in gold. His rank, marshal. His experience, barely more than yours. And you realize, with a nauseating chill, that in Catherine's court, you don't rise by merit. You rise by invitation. One whispered between silk sheets. By the time Catherine ascended the throne in 1762, she had already learned one truth that would shape her reign. Loyalty bought with passion could be more enduring than loyalty sworn in ink. She didn't just choose lovers. She built a private government out of them. Grigory Orlov, the soldier who helped her overthrow her husband, was made count and showered with treasures. He wasn't just a romantic partner. He became the de facto head of the Russian military. His brothers were granted high offices. Foreign dignitaries began using his name in negotiations, not Catherine's. And the Empress smiled, watching it all unfold. But here's where it gets worse. When Orlov began to age, his presence waned. He fell out of favor. The court buzzed with speculation. Would he be sent to the south to die quietly in the heat of Crimea? Catherine had learned to avoid the backlash of disgrace. Instead, she compensated. She gave him a lavish estate. She commissioned paintings of them together, frozen moments that whispered, "See, we are still close." But by then, his place had already been filled by a boy 10 years younger. Ivan Rimsky-Korsakov was barely out of his teens when he became the new favorite. Eyewitness accounts described him as unbearably handsome. A violinist whose looks were so striking that Catherine reportedly gasped when she first saw him. Within days, he was promoted. Within weeks, he had his own wing of the palace. And within months, he controlled access to the Empress herself. Ministers had to pass through him to reach her. But the power behind those doors came with a price. Catherine's lovers were not permitted privacy. Servants recorded every movement. Letters were intercepted. Even the slightest deviation from obedience was grounds for exile. Korsakov learned this the hard way. In 1779, after years as Catherine's chosen, he was accused of having an affair with one of her ladies-in-waiting. The charge was vague. The punishment was swift. He was stripped of all titles, removed from the palace in silence, and sent to the countryside. His name erased from the court registry, as if he had never existed. But this isn't the worst part, because while favorites rose and fell, Catherine's hunger for adoration grew. She demanded devotion not only from her lovers, but from an entire nation. You are now a diplomat, arriving at court with gifts from Prussia. You've been warned. Flatter her beauty before her policies. Praise her grace before her reforms. You step into the grand reception hall, the walls lined with mirrors and silk, chandeliers dripping crystal. Catherine enters, and suddenly, you're not addressing a monarch, you're addressing Venus. Clad in French silks cut low, powdered hair piled high, Catherine smiles at you like a courtesan greeting a favorite client. Every eye in the room watches. Every breath halts. And in that moment, you understand. This woman rules not through fear or law, but through desire. Yours, Heron, the entire courts. The line between empire and bedroom no longer exists. What history books won't tell you is how fragile that arrangement became. As Catherine grew older, her efforts to maintain the illusion intensified. She built elaborate rituals to test loyalty, gifted lovers with palaces, then monitored their dreams. One former attendant wrote, "No one belonged to themselves in that palace. We were all reflections of her." But here's where the danger truly begins. Because what happens when an empire's heartbeat is a woman whose affections shift with the moon. What happens when state policy depends not on reason, but on how much she smiled at breakfast? The answer came in blood. In the early 1770s, whispers began to rise from the countryside. Taxes had increased. Food was scarce. Nobles enriched by Catherine's lovers took more land, conscripted more sons. The peasants looked at the Golden Court, and they saw, not a government, but a theater of sin. They saw the Empress's lust, not as private scandal, but as proof that God had turned his face from Russia. And then came the man who claimed to be her dead husband. In 1773, a former soldier named Yemelyan Pugachev declared he was Peter III, the man Catherine had overthrown and whose death she had sanctioned. He claimed a divine right. He claimed vengeance, and tens of thousands believed him. Peasants rallied under his banner, screaming that the throne had been defiled, that a harlot ruled from a bed of stolen sheets, that a woman who lay with a new man each year could never bear God's favor. The empire caught fire, and as rebel armies marched toward Moscow, burning estates and crucifying nobles, Catherine remained in her palace, writing love letters to Potemkin. Yes, Grigory Potemkin, her new lover, her new general, her new world. But if you think Catherine learned her lesson, you're wrong. Now that you've seen how personal pleasure ignited rebellion and nearly drowned Russia in blood, you're starting to grasp how little separates power from vulnerability. And if uncovering these buried truths pulls you deeper into the hidden machinery of history, truths textbooks dare not print, then stay close. Because the next chapter isn't about love or lust. It's about war. And Catherine was only just beginning. You are riding east from Moscow, commissioned by the Empress herself. A military courier, they say. But your true orders remain sealed in a wax, pressed with Catherine's crest. No one dares ask what's inside. And yet, every man who sees you ride, officers, governors, priests, stares not at your satchel, but your face, because they know what you are. One of her men, one of the beautiful ones. Russia is burning beneath its surface. Pugachev's rebellion has just been crushed, but the scars haven't healed. Whole villages lie in ash. Nobles retreat to their estates, shaken. Whispers ripple through the peasantry. The Empress gives Russia to her lovers, but takes bread from her people. And you? You carry a letter from her to Grigory Potemkin, her newest obsession, her general, her mirror. But here's what they don't tell you. Catherine didn't just elevate Potemkin to soothe her loneliness. She gave him power beyond reason, and it nearly broke the empire. In 1774, as rebel fires cooled, Potemkin rose like a phoenix. His favor with Catherine was immediate, intoxicating, and boundless. A minor noble with military talent and theatrical charm, he became the most powerful man in Russia without a crown. But the Empress didn't simply give him a title. She gave him territory. Vast, unconquered, raw territory. The South. The same region Pugachev had nearly seized. The same region swarming with enemies. Ottomans, Tatars, wild tribes, and ghosts of burned villages. And Potemkin, he turned it into his kingdom, with Catherine's blessing. He ruled it as a lover rules a favored body, fiercely, personally, jealously. Cities rose bearing his name. Armies formed at his command. He distributed land to former favorites and sycophants, men chosen not for loyalty to Russia, but loyalty to her. And behind every decree, every ribbon cutting, every fortress stone laid, was a letter from Catherine, sealed with her scent. But here's where it gets truly twisted. You are now a court painter, tasked with documenting the Empress's journey south. It's 1787. Catherine is planning a royal procession through Potemkin's new dominions, newly civilized lands on paper, still soaked with unrest beneath. Your orders are clear. Depict prosperity. paint glory. Show her majesty ruling a reborn Russia. Only none of it exists. Not really. Potemkin builds facades, entire fake villages erected along the Dnieper River. Wooden houses painted bright, filled with imported peasants dressed in borrowed finery. Livestock paraded on cue. Children rehearsed in songs praising the Empress. You're there when Catherine arrives, surrounded by foreign ambassadors, peering through her gilded carriage. She smiles. She waves. She sees exactly what she wants to believe. And you? You see Potemkin's eyes, bloodshot, frantic, because he knows, if even one corner of the lie collapses, the illusion falls with it. The villages vanish the day after the procession. Peasants go home. Horses are returned, and the empire's southern promise dissolves back into swamps and silence. The term Potemkin village will enter history as a synonym for deception. But in this moment, it's far more than a metaphor. It's a survival strategy, because what Catherine wanted wasn't the truth. She wanted proof that her lover had built a legacy worthy of her bed. But here's the horror. The real costs were paid in blood. You are now a conscript in Crimea. You've been drafted to fight Catherine's war against the Ottoman Empire. A war dreamed in letters, planned in bedrooms, and waged on barren steppes by boys with splintered rifles. Potemkin, ever the showman, commands from afar. His letters to Catherine are perfumed with victory. But the truth? You're freezing to death. Your comrades die of rot before they see a single Turk. Supplies promised never arrive. The roads were never built. The fortresses were painted facades, like the rest of his empire. The Empress receives news of your triumphs. Meanwhile, your body lies buried in unmarked snow. This isn't a failure of logistics. It's a consequence of lust. Because Catherine, desperate to immortalize her reign through Potemkin's vision, ignored every warning. She poured fortunes into the south. She elevated court jesters into generals. She rewarded compliments with armies. By 1789, her imperial court was a carousel of men, each one selected, elevated, and discarded. But none matched Potemkin's ambition, and none matched his madness. He proposed a marriage, a secret one, unrecorded, unrecognized, but sealed in silence between them. Some historians believe it happened. Others doubt it. But Catherine's letters, those survive. Without you, she wrote, I feel like a corpse. One note sent in winter reads, I am lying in my bed as naked as your heart will allow. But here's what chills you. These letters were written while tens of thousands starved, while serfs dug through frozen earth for beetroot, while foreign dignitaries mocked Russia as a love-addled empire ruled by a grandmother and her groom. Because Potemkin was no longer young, neither was she, so their fantasy turned grotesque. You are now a maid in the imperial wing. You've seen the Empress at her mirror, wigs towering above her liver-spotted scalp, perfume masking the rot of time. Her hands tremble when she writes. Her teeth, porcelain replacements, click faintly when she speaks. Yet every day, new favorites are summoned. Handsome men in their 20s, officers barely promoted. Some are terrified, others flattered. All know the price, and Catherine, wrapped in her silk robes, reaches for them with the same hunger that once moved armies. Because the bedroom is still her battlefield. Only now, she's losing. But she doesn't know it yet, because what happens next will shake the very ground beneath her golden palace. The war is not over. The hunger is not sated. And Catherine is about to face the one enemy she can't seduce. Time and betrayal. Coming up, how the final years of Catherine's reign spiraled into obsession, surveillance, and a private empire built on flesh and fantasy. Because even as her body withered, her appetite for control only grew sharper, and Russia would pay the price. You are a court musician, and your fingers tremble as you tune your violin. The Empress is hosting another midnight concert in her private salon. You've played for her many times, but tonight feels different, not because of the music, but because of the man seated beside her. He can't be more than 21. His cheeks still hold the softness of adolescence. His hands, too smooth for war, rest awkwardly in his lap. And yet when Catherine places her palm on his thigh in full view of ministers, generals, and visiting dignitaries, no one blinks, because everyone in the room knows this is the new favorite. And you know something else. His rise is your fall. This is not affection. This is succession. By the late 1780s, Catherine's desire had mutated into something far more dangerous. It was no longer about romance or even control. It was about immortality. The Empress could feel her power slipping. Wrinkles deepened. Letters from abroad began to mock rather than flatter. The same foreign courts that once courted her now whispered jokes behind her back. Russia is ruled by her loins, not her laws. And so Catherine turned to a solution only an empress could afford: ritualized youth. Each year younger men were chosen, not from the nobility, not from the army, but from the pageantry of the court itself. Dancers, singers, students. The selection process became grotesque. You are now a chamberlain, tasked with scouting the candidates. You receive a list. Height requirements. Facial symmetry. Absence of scarring. Youth preferred under 22. You travel the empire not for political negotiation, not for resource assessment, but to find bodies. Catherine doesn't even meet them herself anymore. She trusts her advisors to choose. She's busy composing the love notes to men she hasn't yet seen. One of her advisors, Platon Zubov, arrives at court in 1789. He is 22. She is 60. Within weeks, he is the most powerful man in Russia. And this is where the spiral begins. Zubov becomes her obsession, not because he is wise, not because he is brave, but because he is beautiful. Catherine, in her final decade, believes she can outpace time itself by surrounding herself with youth. But youth is a double-edged blade. Zubov quickly learns his influence isn't tied to loyalty. It's tied to performance. He begins manipulating appointments, selling positions, turning access to the Empress into a currency of corruption. Catherine knows. She just doesn't care, because she's in love. Again. But here's where the sickness spreads. Catherine creates a private intelligence network, not to monitor enemies abroad, but to track the fidelity of her favorites. Secret reports are filed daily: how long they spend in other salons, who they speak to, whether they flirt. And if a favorite strays, Catherine doesn't confront. She writes poetry. She writes verses soaked in jealousy, pain, and erotic longing. One such line reads, "My heart is chained to a shadow who vanishes at dawn." The shadow is Zubov, and the dawn is another young man, barely 18, who now plays chess with the Empress each morning. What you don't see, what Russia doesn't see, is that Catherine has built a palace of mirrors. Each lover reflects the one before. Each promotion echoes the same pattern. And each betrayal deepens her paranoia. You are now a valet serving in the corridors behind the Empress's bedchamber. You hear everything. The late-night sobs. The arguments muffled by brocade. The endless rehearsals of affection. Favorites being coached on how to respond to Catherine's touch. Her jokes. Her moods. Because none of this is spontaneous anymore. It's performance. And you know how performances end. Here's where it all turns lethal. In 1796, Catherine begins drafting plans for an empire-wide expansion. A final campaign to cement her legacy. She dreams of pushing farther into Persia, of launching new social reforms, of rewriting Russian inheritance law to sideline her weak-willed son, Paul. She intends to name her grandson Alexander as heir, a bold move, a dangerous one. And Paul knows. He waits. You are now a doctor summoned to her chambers on November 5th. The Empress has collapsed. She was found on the floor of her private bathroom, her body twisted, her breathing shallow. A stroke. Massive. Irreversible. For days, she hovers on the edge of death. Her favorites crowd the halls in silence. No one dares speak of succession. Not yet. And then Paul arrives, not as a grieving son, but as a storm. He storms the palace, demands the keys to her will, seizes control of the army, locks Zubov in his apartments, orders Catherine's secret archives sealed. When she dies on November 17th, Russia doesn't mourn, it exhales. And Paul's first act as Tsar? He reverses nearly everything she built. He slashes her reforms, exiles her closest advisors, publicly denounces her favorites as parasites of the crown. But most tellingly, he bans any record of her personal correspondence from being published. He doesn't want Russia to remember the Empress who conquered nations. He wants Russia to forget the woman who slept her way through policy. And for a while, it worked. The statues remained. The portraits still hung. But the woman behind the crown faded beneath layers of myth and silence. Until now, you've seen how Catherine used power to shape pleasure, and pleasure to shape power. You've witnessed the rise of lovers, the collapse of institutions, the empire twisted around the hunger of one woman's heart. But what happens when that hunger, unsatisfied even by youth, war, or adoration, consumes her from the inside? Coming up, how Catherine's final descent into obsession turned the Russian court into a gilded prison, where intimacy became surveillance, desire became decree, and the throne itself was nearly buried beneath the weight of her appetites. You've seen seduction. Now prepare to witness destruction. You are a footman stationed in the long corridor outside the Empress's private apartments. It's the spring of 1795, Catherine's final year. The palace walls glisten with gold leaf and mirrors. But the air smells of lavender and something sharper, the decay of obsession. Each morning begins the same. A new letter delivered. A new reply dictated in trembling cursive. And always, always, a tray sent to Platon Zubov's chambers, pears, cheese, wine, and a lock of hair wrapped in silk ribbon. But Zubov doesn't smile anymore, because now he's afraid. Catherine is 70, he is 25, and the gap between them is no longer just years. It's an abyss filled with demands, surveillance, jealousy, and emotional warfare. You don't serve a monarchy anymore. You serve a theater, and the audience is gone. By this point, Catherine's court has become a labyrinth of echoes. Every hallway lined with portraits of her past lovers. Every chamber haunted by the ghost of someone younger, handsomer, more clever. And Zubov, he's walking the same tightrope they all did. One misstep and he'll vanish, just like they did. But here's where it turns sinister. Catherine doesn't just fear aging. She fears disappearing. She fears that without her body, her beauty, her control, Russia will forget her. So she does what no empress has done before. She starts recording herself, not with quills alone, but with painters, poets, architects, and scholars. She commissions statues. She writes her memoirs. She forces courtiers to read her essays aloud in salons, pretending to be moved, even as their eyes avoid hers. You are now a sculptor brought in from France. Your commission: a life-size marble statue of the Empress, not in her current form, but as Minerva, goddess of wisdom, young, strong, bare-armed. Catherine insists on approving every detail. She dictates the angle of the chin, the curve of the lips. She has the chest enlarged, the waist tightened. You will carve me, she says, as I should be remembered. What she doesn't say aloud, what everyone feels, is this. She's building a monument to drown the truth, but the cracks are showing. Her nights grow longer. The fires in her room burn hotter. She takes laudanum to sleep and wakes with trembling hands. One attendant, years later, wrote, "She could command armies, but could not conquer the mirror." And the mirror now is everywhere. It's in the new wing she builds for Zubov, in the ballroom redesigned to reflect her in 30 separate panels, in the false laughter of guests, too afraid to speak of anything but love. But here's where the final horror begins. You are now a young boy, no more than 15, chosen from a military academy for your manners and dancing and expression. You were told you'd serve the court, that you'd learn from the best. Instead, you are paraded before Catherine in a velvet tunic, then assigned quarters 2 doors from hers. The staff doesn't look you in the eye. Your name isn't listed on the court registry. And at night, when the door opens, you are told not to speak, only to listen, only to comfort, only to be present. You don't understand what's happening. You only know you're not allowed to leave. And if you try to tell anyone, you'll be dismissed for disloyalty. Because now, the Empress's desires are not just personal, they're enforced. This isn't seduction. This is policy, a system, and it has teeth. By 1796, Catherine employs a private network of informants to monitor every interaction between her and the young men brought into court. She reads their letters, questions their instructors, keeps notes on their behavior. One surviving document, coded in cipher, lists 16 boys, their names, ages, physical descriptions, and Catherine's notes. Charming smile, nervous hands, asks too many questions. This wasn't passion. This was control disguised as affection. And the court? It obeyed, because to challenge her now was to challenge the crown itself. But here's what finally broke the illusion. Catherine began writing decrees based on dreams. Literal dreams. She would wake in the morning and declare that she'd received divine inspiration. One day, all schoolboys must be taught French by women. Another, poetry is to be required reading in military academies. Another still, all portraits of her must show her younger than 35. You are now an archivist, and you're ordered to adjust historical documents, rewrite her correspondences, edit her speeches, remove references to her age, her illnesses, her failures. One directive reads, "History shall remember me as I define it, not as it happened." But history has a way of remembering what it's not supposed to. And Russia, though silent, is watching. The nobles whisper. The servants flinch. Zubov avoids her gaze. And the young boys. They vanish as quickly as they arrive. She's surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. And when Catherine finally collapses in her chamber, body failing, speech slurred, surrounded by portraits of lovers who no longer live, none of them are there. Not one. Zubov doesn't hold her hand. The boys aren't summoned. She dies staring at a mirror. And the mirror at last tells the truth. Coming up, the final chapter, where myth dies, legacy fractures, and Russia must confront the real cost of being ruled by desire, dressed as destiny. Because Catherine the Great may have conquered lands, but her heart, her greatest battlefield, remained a ruin she never dared to map. You are a laundress, summoned to the imperial quarters on the morning of November 17th, 1796. The scent hits you first. Lavender powder clinging to death. The Empress's body lies slumped beside her dressing table, one slipper twisted beneath her. Her face is frozen in a strange half-smile, not one of peace, not even of pain, of disbelief. The woman who ruled for over 3 decades has died alone, mid-gesture, reaching not for a crown, not for a letter, but for a mirror. And within hours the world begins dismantling her. Not her corpse, her legend. You see, Catherine had spent years weaving the story she wanted Russia to believe. Minerva reborn. enlightened, despot, lover of knowledge, patron of the arts. But behind the velvet curtains, there's another story, one you've now lived, and in the hours after her death, that story begins to bleed through the walls. The palace servants are ordered to remove certain items before Paul, her son, arrives. Sealed boxes disappear. Letters are burned in hearths still warm with the perfume of her final night. But not everything is erased. One valet hides a journal. A physician keeps her final prescriptions. A discarded note reads, "Do not let them see me old. Remember me young. Remember me, beloved." But that was never possible, because what Catherine left behind wasn't love. It was architecture, a whole empire built around her body. You are one of the guards assigned to seal off the Empress's private apartments. The corridor is silent, but the rooms behind the doors pulse with ghost light. You open the first one and find dozens of miniature portraits hung in sequence along the walls. Each one is a lover, labeled by year. Framed in gold, their eyes seem to follow you. Some are children, others are generals. One has a noose drawn faintly into the background. Another is crossed out entirely. And beside them, drawers filled with letters, some romantic, some obsessive, some begging, many threatening. One begins, "You promised me command. Instead, I am forgotten." Another, "You made me touch you like a king, and now I die like a dog." The letters were never sent. She kept them, filed them, indexed them, because Catherine didn't discard people. She archived them. But here's what breaks you. In a locked cabinet, you find hair, bundles of it, tied with ribbons, some blonde, some black, some the pale, colorless down of boyhood, each one tagged, a name, a date, a note, kind eyes, sang to me. Disappointed. It's not grief that overtakes you, it's nausea. This isn't love. This is collection. And Russia was her cabinet. The nation mourns, but it mourns like a child waking from fever. Catherine's rule is recast by the hour. In salons, nobles whisper that the great reformer was merely a woman, ruled by her cravings. In foreign courts, ambassadors joke that Russia's crown was passed from bed to bed. Her successor, Paul I, does not honor her wishes. He buries her quickly, forbids the printing of her memoirs, seals her papers, and in his first decree, he outlaws female succession to the throne, not just to erase her legacy, to make sure there will never be another Catherine. But what Catherine left behind cannot be so easily buried. She expanded Russia's borders. She reformed institutions. She introduced ideas that would echo into the 19th century, but she also normalized a system where power flowed through intimacy, where young bodies were traded like coin, where empire and desire became indistinguishable. And the cost was human. Zubov fades into exile. The boys vanish into silence. The women who watched, who whispered, who arranged the schedules, none speak. But Russia remembers. It remembers the secret doors, the velvet bells, the maps drawn in flesh and favor. And though the statues still stand, Minerva, regally posed, they cannot hide the cracks. Because now you know. You've walked through the corridors. You've opened the letters. You've seen the hair. And you've understood that beneath every empire built by seduction, there lies a burial ground of those who could not say no. If this journey has torn through the illusions you were taught in school, if it's shown you how easily history can be softened, edited, romanticized, then don't stop here. The past still holds more secrets, more corridors, more names hidden in drawers. Keep digging, keep watching, because the truth about power is not found in thrones or titles. It's found in what they were willing to do behind locked doors to keep them.